Welcome to Linking into Sales. This is Martin Brossman.
I'm Greg Heyer.
And I'm Elise Archer.
This is really exciting. We've got Koka Sexton on, and Koka, we're going to go into a few things ahead of time, but you win the award of the most required steps in social selling to get you on the show.
I was actually trying to keep count and actually count up to this. I think you ended up touching me on at least 5 different social profiles to make this happen.
I was ready to write a handwritten note, the next one. So it snail mail would be it.
Yeah.
So exciting. I enjoyed it.
Something would have got to me.
I enjoyed it. I think I was on Snapchat with ears or something to get your attention.
Yes, and I'm rarely on Snapchat, but I got a notification. I was like, this is bizarre. And I opened it. I was like, oh my gosh, it's him again.
Well, welcome to the show. We're going to do a little intro here, and then we'll start with a very exciting show. We got a lot to cover today, and I'm going to pass you over to Greg for some opening information we have.
Yeah. So first, we have probably just like 1 or 2 little news items to talk about. We have there are some updates regarding Twitter as well, which they've been surprised. They've had their earnings report came out, and they're sort of looking a little bit better for them. But they also they actually announced a few deals regarding some live streaming. I don't think we're going to see NFL Thursday Night Football on there, but we'll see some more sports and things like that. Anyways, great way to actually have a conversation with a prospect is take and talk sports with folks. That always helps. Also, we're noticing that from Microsoft, being that they had acquired LinkedIn, or the deal kind of closed up last year, we have noticed that they're starting to integrate some more webinars with LinkedIn, using some of the folks out of LinkedIn Enterprise Sales Group up there. So actually, there's a webinar that's happening this week, which by the time you're listening to this, it'll probably come to pass. But they're actually talking about how you can use LinkedIn with Office 365. And I believe also they're going to be talking about how to create a LinkedIn profile. So if you have some time, definitely go out there and see if you can find the replay for that. We'll put a link in the show notes just in case. That they do have a replay available for that. Last thing is just we have a skill on Amazon.
That's right.
It just recently got updated last night. We won't talk about how often that's been done. But anyways, go out to Amazon and search for a social selling tip of the day. And if you have an Echo device, you can actually add the social selling tip of the day to your briefing, to your flash briefing every morning, and you get a tip from me. Usually they run about 2 or 3 minutes. And I put some cool background music to it. So anyways, enjoy that. If you want to listen to past tips, then go out to linkingintosales.com/Alexa to check those out. And then we also, let's talk about our sponsor.
Our sponsor, which is socialselling.training, our
That's right.
website for training information. And we've got a fundamental social selling. We've put a lot of time in. It's in the process of rolling out, and we're just not compromising on quality. We want it to be the best we can. So it's taking a little longer. Thanks for everyone listening and waiting, but we've put a lot of thought into this one.
So head out to socialselling.training to learn a little bit more about that. Of course, we have other courses that are available, such as how to establish a social selling routine, how to create a customer-facing LinkedIn profile. If you still have the old profile, that one course is going to get replaced. So anyone who has that course, we're going to be working on that as soon as we finish up with the fundamentals of social selling course.
And there'll be a free upgrade for people who have the old
ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our guests. Greg, you were the one that first introduced me to this wild man. Well, I'll let you do the introduction.
So I'm going to like off the cuff this because I did not write this down. I've been so super busy about doing with other things going on. I did not write down his bio, but I know him. He doesn't know me that well, but I know. I feel like I know him pretty well.
Okay,
I feel like I know you pretty well too.
Okay, all right. So at least we're social in that respect. Yeah. So, but Koka Sexton has an incredible career. He's actually a U.S. Army veteran. He has served our country and served it well. I believe he actually had a tour in Iraq, if I remember correctly.
Yes, my last tour was in Iraq from 2004. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for your service there.
Absolutely.
And then he's worked at LinkedIn, which is where I caught up with him and started following everything that he was doing, from webinars to speaking at Salesforce to the content that he was helping with put out there for LinkedIn. He was the global head of social media for for sales. I believe that was for the enterprise sales, and helping push social selling and LinkedIn together out there. So that was fantastic. He then recently, not too long ago, left LinkedIn, which we'll find out why, and then,
or not,
and then now he's actually working with Hootsuite, which is kind of cool because Hootsuite has been a champion of social selling as well. You've heard us talk about it, and actually I think it's on our recommended list. We had an episode a couple years ago about top 35 social selling tools you should consider using, and Hootsuite was on that list. We also talked a while ago with Mick Lernot of Sales Prodigy, which was acquired by Hootsuite last year, I think, or a year before. So last year. So now it's like Hootsuite. What's going on there? So anyway, so he's helping sales, actually getting understanding the process of talking to the C-suite in a slightly different context. But we're going to hear a lot more about that. But Koka, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming to the Social Selling Podcast.
Hey, for not having that written down, you did really well.
Yeah,
thank you. That means you put out good social updates.
Yeah.
Oh, and I should mention that he has 2 kids, if I remember correctly.
2. Yes,
he has 2.
8 and 4.
And is I guess your wife is in photography, if I remember correctly, and you're based out of San Francisco.
Now we're getting creepy.
Yeah, that's right.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yes, I'm based out of San Francisco.
Okay, and he travels a lot. So,
welcome.
welcome.
And the title of our show is a long working title we came up with: The Evolution of Social Selling and Several Specific Techniques that can help salespeople be more productive, which is kind of open season on all types of stuff. But we really wanted to talk about social selling, experience with LinkedIn, where you see it's come, where you see it's going. And I'm going to start with just, if you'd be kind enough to give your definition of what is social selling, because we've asked many people that on our journey.
Yeah, so I define social selling, and I've been consistent with this over the years, as leveraging your professional brand to fill your pipeline with the right people, insights, and relationships. That was a definition that was put together while I was at LinkedIn. A lot of time, in fact, a lot of time was put into that definition, which I think is a little bit crazy, but I understand how things work there. And the time was really spent on where do the words fit into the definition. They had an idea of all of this stuff that should be in the definition, but exactly where should those words be placed? And they were very specific about it. And the idea that it starts with your professional brand, I think was the most prominent piece that we wanted to make sure was part of this, because I believe that social selling is about the person. As much as it helps a company, as much as it drives revenue or should ultimately drive to pipeline, it is about leveraging your professional brand and empowering employees to have that voice. And then the idea of leading with insights. If you're gonna fill your pipeline, research continues to show the best way to get in front of a prospect or a decision maker buyer is to have these insights, these things that they may not be already aware of, or information that may be privy to you because of data that you have that they may not have the ability to see. And ultimately, this idea of building strong relationships, which I think opens up a lot of different conversations about where social fits into that that part of the conversation.
Very cool. I noticed, and I forgot to mention this in the intro for you, that you had worked at Inside View and actually was a social selling U, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So,
okay.
Go back in history for a little bit. I was a sales rep for a long period of time, and I was in between jobs, and I applied for a role at Inside View. They're a sales intelligence company, and I applied for a sales job, and they had basically told me thanks but no thanks. I didn't have the pedigree, as they put it, to get hired there. I think their exact response was, you'd never worked for a SaaS company before, so we don't think that you'd be a good fit. And then about a couple weeks later, they brought me in and said, we want to interview you. And I was like, I'm not really sure. Could be good, could be bad. Like, if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, it's probably not a good thing for either of us. And they were persistent. So I came in and I interviewed, and they said that, we want to offer you this marketing role. And I was like, whoa, I don't like marketers. Have you heard my story? As a sales rep, I hated marketing. This is why I had to learn how to use social so well, which would make me a great salesperson for your business. And they said, no, that's exactly the reason why we think that you need to be in marketing. And that allowed me, and it ended up being the best career decision I ever made, or one of the best ones, because it allowed me to get really laser focused on this idea of where social media fits into the sales ecosystem.
Interesting. So that was in 2010, late 2010, which is kind of funny because it wasn't too long around then we started linking into sales. And this proliferation of where when probably around that time we were having that conversation of like, wow, marketing is adopting social incredibly, but there's an opportunity here for sales to take and use social if they do it right, right? And
absolutely.
Is that kind of so? As you're getting into your role there with Inside View, is that kind of some of the feelings that maybe they had and that you shared the same thoughts as well?
Yeah, I don't know if they had those feelings exactly, but that's what I pushed on them, right? I mean, coming from a sales background, I had this inherent desire to always pull the revenue, just because I understood that that's what my job was as a salesperson, and it was astonishing to me that marketing professionals didn't have that same drive. And when I started off in a marketing role, the KPIs that were given to me seemed so abstract and so, like, I wouldn't say fluffy or easy to get. I was like, well, what's the business value of all of this stuff? And I was challenged, and they said, if you can find a way to track a tweet to revenue, you'll be worth your weight in gold. And that became my mission. And we eventually cracked that code. Like, how did we actually drive revenue from social media? And that then continued to spur this whole idea of why salespeople need to start adopting the same ideas and methodologies to become successful.
Would you talk a little bit about that? The cracking the code and using a tweet to revenue?
Yeah, I mean, back then in 2010, the technology didn't exist the way that it does now. Tracking mechanisms are so much better today than they were in 2010. So the way that I did this was, marketing was running campaigns, programs to drive traffic based on an email list or whatever the medium was to a specific landing page. And that's how they were generating leads. My idea was, hey, why don't we just clone this landing page? We use one for marketing campaigns and we use one for just the social channels. And we would know that anything that became a lead from this cloned landing page would we could attribute social media from. And as we saw that this proliferation of email did really well and social was actually producing, we just weren't like optimizing for it, but it was still working. We said, there's something here. Let's start funneling more of our resources into the social piece because it's such a lower barrier of entry. And we were seeing the conversion rates much higher when it came to getting the lead and then re-engaging those individuals on social channels by connecting with them on LinkedIn, following them on Twitter, whatever it may be. And that was basically my initial step into tracking this. And once we had figured that out, then we started seeing all the additional tracking mechanisms that were becoming available to us. And it became much easier for us to actually tie this stuff back into our CRM.
You were using Salesforce at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, so today, I guess one of the ways that we're able to, I guess, track or attribute is basically looking at a lead source. Hang on. Is that you?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. All right. So I guess with today, would that be like looking at your lead source?
Yeah, it's basically a lead source. And now we have the ability with other tracking codes to actually track UTM parameters, for example. So now you can use one single landing page and have UTM parameters across different, mediums, and you can actually pull that into the Salesforce to see what was actually producing this opportunity.
Okay. All right. And so what led to Social Selling You?
So Social Selling You, started off as like a pet project on my side because I was still very much involved in this idea of where social media intersected with sales. And as a marketing person, I had a job to do. My job was to drive leads, to build awareness, brand campaigns, all of these things that I was doing in content marketing within Inside View. But I needed to do something for me. And part of that was I kept seeing and hearing from even our own reps, as well as the reps at other customers, that social media was something that was just totally, foreign to them. They knew how to use Facebook. They connected with their family and their friends, but they didn't understand LinkedIn to any extent. They didn't really know what Twitter's use case would be as a salesperson. And to me, it was totally natural. So as I would talk to these reps on a one-off basis, I'd see light bulbs go off and be like, oh, now I get it. You're telling me that if I'm following XYZ company on Twitter and I see that there's a news alert from something that came from some other trigger event, I can actually tweet to them and they'll respond. I was like, absolutely. And then they would do it. They'd see the success, and that would start cracking them into specific accounts. Now, that was very one-off. It was individualized conversations, and what Social Selling U was supposed to do, what it ended up doing was really formalizing this idea of where social selling education was going to go.
Okay.
So I could do it at scale.
Interesting. So how'd that lead you to, because it looks like around the same time in February of 2013 is about when you left there and you went over to LinkedIn.
Yeah. So
were you writing
it wasn't that short of a gap. It was happening. I mean, I was at Inside View for a period of years.
Okay.
And what happened, towards the end of my tenure at Inside View was I was becoming known in the space as being the social selling thought leader. I was being, I think I was called the godfather of social selling at one point. And as much as I enjoyed this, as I kept getting more requests to come speak at companies or speak at events, most of these companies and events really wanted me to talk about LinkedIn. I like to talk about it as a whole, just social selling and the theories and the practices behind it. But when I would talk to companies, they'd say, you know what, I get it, Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook, all these things, and how that could help. But I really wanted my reps to understand how to use LinkedIn better. And so it became, as much of an expert as anybody can, because as fast as the platform changes, on how to use LinkedIn as a salesperson. And because of that, I became even more well-known in the space as being this LinkedIn social selling expert. And when LinkedIn was in the process of building Sales Navigator, it's basically just a wireframe and some add-ins into LinkedIn.com. They were building out their own team. They had a small sales team. They had a very small, a micro marketing team, and they were really investing and building resources around it. I was approached to come work for LinkedIn. And again, it was a huge honor. It was a great privilege to even be considered. But I wasn't really sure. I was doing really well at Inside View. I was basically, as I would call it, like riding high in the saddle, because I was that guy. And I didn't know if that would transfer over into LinkedIn or not. And ultimately, being a part of big enterprises, we all know that sometimes things go sideways and they just cut entire departments. And I was like, I'm doing really well here. Do I really want to take this risk? And when I weighed it out, it made perfect sense. Like, at what point in my life would a kid with a high school education that fell into this world of sales, that became this known entity in this world of social selling, ever get an opportunity, regardless if it failed or was successful, to work for a company like LinkedIn, who was world renowned as a social networking space? And so I took the opportunity and built the content and social strategy that ultimately launched the Sales Navigator platform.
Fantastic. I like how you mentioned that high school education. So I know we've had a few folks, at least in the social media masterminds group, that I mentioned, or maybe it was you. No, I think you started that discussion in the social media masterminds group on Facebook about, how you started, you got to where you are, even if you do have a high school education.
I started tagging some stuff on Facebook, hashtag Koka Confessions, and one of which was, I never graduated from college. And it was interesting to see all of the comments from people who were basically in the same boat. But mainly it was to point out the fact that, nothing should ever hold you back, right? What we want to do, what our vision is of ourselves, it should not be limited because of what we haven't accomplished. Just keep looking forward and keep moving.
Yeah, I think mine was I barely did or something, or it took an extra year or something. But made it.
And again, going back even further, my initial career path wasn't in social media or business or anything. I was going to be in law enforcement. I mean, that was where the military came from. And I made a pivot into this world of sales and then just fell into all the rest of this.
I love that. I want to go back and ask a question based on your just your own professional brand and building that. I love your definition of social selling. And so the fact that you got known as the godfather of social selling, which is pretty badass, by the way. podcast. I should know that. But anyway, the fact that you did get noticed that, how did you do that? What steps did you take to build your professional brand that got you to that place?
So I wish I could, I mean, when I look back now, it's always easier to connect the dots backwards. But when I put myself in those shoes years ago, there was no plan to do this. I had an idea what a professional brand was or a personal brand was, but I didn't set out to do this. So when I talk to other professionals that say, I want to build my own brand, like, how do I go about it? There are many tips and tricks and tactics and things that people should follow. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that the only reason I was able to get a brand of any size was because I added value in excess of anything that I ever asked for from the community around me. I just knew that I had to share anything that I learned with a wider audience, and that was going to build that audience even wider.
That's great. What a great comment. Information on it as well.
Yeah, that ties in with a book I actually just finished reading. I don't know if you guys have read it, called Love is the Killer App by, I think, Tim Sanders is his name. Have any of you guys read it?
I have not.
No, sounds like a good one to get.
Yeah, it's a good book recommendation, but the whole idea is just like the best thing you can do to build your network and build your platform is just give away as much as possible. And so some people think it's super scientific, but it sounds like that was really your approach. It's just
It is, and there's scientific stuff to it. And now I feel like I'm clawing my way at times to like make sure that I'm holding ground in some ways. But again, there are many times it seems effortless, because I honestly believe that, when somebody says something, either I can add value or I can't. And if I can, I've built enough of an audience that when I say it, it gets echoed. Like today, for example, I published a blog post around the death of social selling. Mm-hmm. And it was in response to somebody else's blog post saying social selling was dead. And I literally got I got fired up on the inside. And it's been a really long time since I've been that passionate to sit down and write something. And I think the original blog post, the guy who wrote, social selling is dead, even wrote, it took him 4 hours to write, 40 hours, I think, to write this blog post. And I wanted to put him in a little jab at the end of it saying, hey, XYZ, you're going to see all the names as you do your own research. But, it took me 2 hours to write that because I was passionate about this. I literally just sat down. I knew all the data. I knew where to find the right insights. And I just wrote this thing as fast as I could.
Would you talk a little bit about it? Because we were just looking at that article today, and we'll put it in the show notes.
By the way, Lisa, if you haven't seen it yet, your friends from Inside Sales wrote it. We had them on not too long ago. Yeah. So Gabe wrote the article.
That's great.
Yeah, and I'm a huge. So let's start off with this. I'm a huge fan of Inside Sales. I've known Ken Krog for years. In fact. Funny story. In fact, I'm not going to show you. I'm wearing my InsideSales.com socks. So I think I wore those subconsciously, knowing that I was going to get published on the blog post today. Yeah. But the blog post really was trying to point out this idea that social selling is basically this buzzword and this trend that doesn't really work. But which I thought was really ironic was that as he was writing this blog post, he was actually giving me ammunition for my rebuttal. And so you'll see in my blog post, I'm literally just copying and pasting from his blog post and just putting a different spin on it, saying this is why it works. If the buyers are spending more time on social media, that is why salespeople need to be involved. If you're going to say that these decision makers are doing these 5 things, here are the 5 reasons why salespeople are on social doing this stuff. It was a really fun article to write around the idea that people still are saying that social selling is dying, when I honestly believe we're just scratching the surface.
I'm all with you on that one, in total agreement, because I think that a lot of people, I guess, they try to equate social selling to some other way of like cold calling or some other tactic, when it isn't. It's a philosophy. Would you agree with that?
It is a philosophy. I call it, in fact, he calls it out in there because, and again, I don't know if it was meant as a jab as me, but I call social selling my religion, and I preach this gospel. And, because I feel that, I feel that connected to this idea that cold calling is archaic and should never be practiced. Companies that cold call as an organization, as a standard methodology or practice, are so desperate for customers, they're going to fail. If that's the tactics you have to resort into, you've done something terribly wrong along the way. And does that mean that only leveraging LinkedIn or only leveraging Twitter to generate your own pipeline as a salesperson is the only option? Of course not. It's not a replacement for any of these other tools. It's an addition. Social fits so much better within the normal cadence of a sales cycle. So, one of the things that I hear all the time is this idea of cadence, that you leave an email, and then you leave a voicemail, and then you send a LinkedIn request referring back to the original email, and this entire loop that happens. Like, social just becomes part of that process. And what really gets me fired up is when somebody says, "Oh, throw all that stuff away and just start making more phone calls."
What would you say is some of the misunderstandings of social selling? Because we see it too. We see even some from the companies selling social selling making some of those mistakes.
So I think some of the misunderstandings or biggest mistakes are this, is that, it's still in its infancy, right? So, social selling is a relatively new concept. And so what happens is people say, oh, it's the new shiny object, when in reality, it's just the next extension of where sales needs to go. If you told a sales organization that's I wouldn't say a laggard, but like in this movable middle stage, that they don't need, email tracking, that they don't need, these other digital components of their jobs, and they should really just rely on just sending blind emails to people, like, you'd think they're insane. So I think defining it has been a challenge, because many people see social selling as a prospecting tool, and it is. It works really well. But I do disagree, and I disagree strongly that that's the only use case. Social selling is the life cycle of your customer's journey. In many cases, your initial, if you're tracking this correctly, leads are coming in from social, right? As a salesperson, you should then be identifying that and then engaging with these people on social also, because that's the medium that they came in from. And then once they buy from you, you don't just stop engaging with them. You need to continue that, and the customer success managers and everybody else needs to continue that momentum. That's how you keep customers happy. That's how you make them feel connected. That's how you humanize your brand on a much larger scale. And time and time again, when I talk to companies that are doing this really well, and they find it within their own data that companies are staying with them as vendors, because when they have a problem, they know how to reach out to them. That's how they're creating customer loyalty. One of the reasons why companies are, I guess companies change vendors. One of the reasons why they churn is because they say, we had problems that weren't being addressed. And then the vendor says, well, we didn't even know you were having these problems, right? So why not give them as many channels as possible to raise their hand and say, you know what, something's broken here, or can you explain to me how to use this tool? Because another reason why companies churn out of vendors is because they just didn't utilize all the aspects of the platform. So they're like, oh, we're spending a whole ton of money and not getting a lot of value out of it. So social selling, social media needs to be a component of every part of your business to keep that customer engaged through the entire life cycle.
One thing you mentioned there, you said at the beginning, you said a lead coming from social, but leads don't necessarily have to come from social in order for social selling to work. Is that right?
No, absolutely. I mean, regardless of the channel, I think that most buyers that are active on social media would enjoy that engagement, regardless of how they came across your company to begin with.
Okay. All right, cool.
I'm curious to know, what's one of the most creative ways you've seen a salesperson use social media to connect with a prospect? Like, what stands out to you?
So one of the things, and it's funny you bring that up, I was actually just talking with somebody about this earlier today. I think that video is becoming an amazing outlet for salespeople, the ones that can do it well. And I see sales reps that have no, disregard for getting in front of a camera, sending a 30-second video tweet to people, right? Or sending a video email, or whatever that may be. I think video is going to continue to dominate and grow in the space. I think it's interesting to see how they're immediately breaking down this digital barrier by making a face-to-face connection, even if it's one-sided, just talking to that person through a video and saying, thank you so much for following me, or really glad that you connected with me on LinkedIn. I'd like to follow you on Twitter too. Let me know if you have any questions. And then they move on to the next one.
Yeah, great.
Elise, you were saying that a while ago and using it too. And we've used it several times. Elise and I used it to get someone on the show, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Martin, you were using that to get to me.
I know. I didn't put the ears on for the other person. You were special.
Special.
Yeah, that was actually where we've had to use. I mean, Elise and Martin were actually just used a YouTube private video to send it over to Drew DeAugustino, I think his last name is pronounced, over at Crystal Nose.
Yeah.
And that's how we actually got him to come on, or they got him to come on the podcast. And we had a great discussion about what Crystal.
What a creative way to just break through the noise and come across totally different than everybody else who's trying to get you to get on a meeting with them, right? Like you just send them a video.
Well, they internalized it, and then they basically said, and all of his folks there were saying, you just got social sold, so now you have to do the podcast.
Yeah, you do.
That was great fun. Great fun. We really got it.
So with regards to, let's go down this line with video for a second, because I wholeheartly agree. Video is incredibly powerful. It's definitely more powerful than say a photo or just text. But so what platforms do you think are going to really kill it when it comes to maybe social selling and video? Because I know LinkedIn is not exactly all that. I'm sure you can upload a video, you can send it attached in a message or something like that, but there's no native video on LinkedIn. And with Facebook and Instagram and a few others that, there's some video stuff there, but what are you seeing?
So, I think the one company that's trying to figure this out the most is a company called Vidyard. They have pioneered the space of sending video through email, and it was typically used as a marketing organization. But now they have a product that is designed for salespeople. We're piloting it here at Hootsuite, but I've seen it in the wild and being used by other people. It's just this immediate breaking of a barrier where you open an email and there's a video and it's this person talking to me as opposed to me having to read their pitch. And the reality is that nobody's going to get on a video and give their elevator pitch. If they're, the idea is they start telling a story and it pulls you in and says, I want to reply to this to hear the rest of that story.
Go ahead, Elise.
Sorry, I was taking notes. You said it was Video Yard?
Vidyard. Vidyard.
Okay, cool. I've been using a different service. I'm going to look into that. Awesome.
What have you been using, Elise? Add that one in too.
Yeah, I'm using BombBomb right now, which I don't know how it compares to Vidyard. I somehow haven't heard of Vidyard. But you're exactly right, Koka. It's so much more effective to have that email in there. And one thing that I'm loving about BombBomb, and I am not paid by them, so this is not like a paid endorsement, but you can do a LinkedIn video message if you're a first connection. So you can send a follow-up message to somebody via video directly through LinkedIn, which I found is good. And you can probably do that with Facebook too. I don't know. Cool. Okay, Martin, go. You had a question.
Well, I want to say, Koka, in developing a Snapchat for Business class, I found it really useful, the discipline of getting to the point in 10 seconds and using Snapchat as a way to discipline myself to not get too winded and see if I could drop a message in within 10 seconds or a story or information. And sometimes I just record myself or practice it. So I just want to add, that's something I hadn't thought of when I was learning Snapchat and learning how to teach it and work with it. That it could be a discipline to get to the point quicker.
Oh, it is a discipline. And I think that's where you see a lot of people fail, is because they don't understand that it is a discipline and actually adapt to it. They're still trying to behave the old way and just using a new platform, when the reality is the nuances of each social network need to be respected individually. So getting on Snapchat or even like Instagram stories, you have to get to that point fairly fast, and you have to make sure that what you're saying is it's tonality. It's all these other things that you wouldn't have to worry about on an email. How you're presenting yourself, how you're framing yourself, because people are actually watching this in many cases. So there's a lot of other nuances that people aren't paying attention to. So they just grab their phone and they start talking, and you're at a camera looking up somebody's nose, and it's just not an ideal situation. But again, there are people who are doing this really well. And every time I come across one, I start following them because I'm a student as much as I am a teacher.
I want to say we also, a group of us in the area, started a video Toastmasters to get people comfortable building a relationship with what I call a black dot, Koka, because it's not an immediate natural experience. So there's a local group that's a Toastmasters, and we have a camera, and the job is to get comfortable looking at the camera, not the audience.
Yes.
And that's to me something I want to say. I want to give people permission that it takes a little practice. I remember when I first did it, I was on a cable show with a coaching tip, and it looked like a giant cannon to me aimed at me. And I just go, just relax and look at it. I go, shouldn't I duck or something? And, and then I realized, no, this is something that gives me a competitive advantage, because if I make the effort and the discipline to learn it, I'll have an advantage over other people. So there's another piece to it.
Absolutely. And it's about getting that competitive advantage.
Excellent. Anything else on that? I want to talk a little bit about LinkedIn, if you'll talk about it.
Let's talk about some LinkedIn.
To the degree you're willing to discuss the changes of LinkedIn, I have very mixed emotions on it, and you can get as specific or different. Some people think it might have been a department saying, you better come up with something new. I don't care what it is, push it out the door. And others say it's an amazing new addition. So I'll try to say politically agnostic on that topic.
What new addition are you talking about?
The upgrades in the last year of LinkedIn, the reformatting, the not completing the code to give me specifically what the people I'm following are actually posting, and finding out they haven't finished writing the code yet for it on Twitter, things like that. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I reveal a little bias in myself there?
I'm going to go back and search for this tweet of the dev who actually admitted that.
Yeah.
So am I a fan? Like I heart LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I admire what they've built and what they're continuing to build.
Yes.
Is their product perfect? No, it's not. Right. It wasn't perfect when I started. It's still not perfect, because we all wanted to do these amazing things for us. We all see the potential of that much data put into a platform, and how it can propel us through our careers, and how it's going to be able to connect us to these opportunities, and how it's powering this human connection with people all around the world. When they made the switch, I believe it was codenamed Neptune, from the old profile views into the new. The idea behind it was LinkedIn's mobile and desktop were basically sitting on two different platforms, and they knew that that was a battle not to fight, and they had to get everything into one. So the idea, I believe, if I remember correctly, was they wanted to make everything look the same from mobile to desktop, just seamless, so that you were on desktop seeing one thing and you go to the mobile device and see something else. So I think that was the driving factor for building it this way. Now, my insight into that was that building a whole nother platform for LinkedIn was a massive undertaking. Mm-hmm. And I was there towards the end of that. And I heard the grumblings, and I heard the excitement about what this was turning into. And because of the undertaking that is, certain features and functionality need to fall off. Many times, as I'm sure each of us can have our own war stories about, there have been moments where we go into LinkedIn and all of a sudden something we had really enjoyed about the platform was just gone. Uh-huh. My pain point, and in fact, I was at LinkedIn when this happened, was LinkedIn Signals. Mm-hmm. LinkedIn Signals was probably the social selling holy grail, because I could find everything. And they eventually shut it down. There was multiple reasons for it, and I do understand and agree with why they did it. But that was one of those times where you're looking at a platform and what this has available to you, and you start using it, and something just goes away. LinkedIn makes, I'd say, 90% or more of their decisions on what stays and what goes and what gets resources and what gets resources pulled from it based on member usage. They are such a data-driven company, almost to an extreme, and I mean that in a very positive light. It's actually, they've taught me how to be very much more data-driven than my emotional idea of driving to decisions. I'm always looking at the information behind it before I make a reaction. And when they would look at usage data, they would look at, the 400 million, I think they're at 500 million now, users, and say, are they, as a large enough percentage, doing these things? And if that answer is no, there's a good chance that it's going to get cut because they want to continue to building for the audience that it has. The problem with that is the niche use cases like us, like sales professionals or marketing people that use this platform, we're a smaller subset of that massive audience. And even though we find massive value in a feature of the platform, it may just not be widely adopted across the masses. And because of that, it gets put on the chopping block. They don't look at specific use case and say, well, what are salespeople using on the platform? They say, what are our members using? Because that's how they're making larger, product decisions. Which again, is one of the great reasons as to why tools like Sales Navigator is broken away and created its own platform, because they wanted the independence to look at a very specific audience and say, what features and functionality should we continue to build on? What is it that this audience is asking for that we can build into it? And I've seen them continue to evolve into what is in Sales Navigator. It also helps at the company a lot because now they have another paid offering to start funneling people into.
I just need to say that's fantastic in helping understand the insight, that put it through the filter and ask yourself, if they dropped it, the chances is they are number driven and they just didn't have the volume, because I love the questions and answers and I'm still whining about losing it. Yeah. But I once you understand their filter, then it's easier to understand why they're doing it and what motivated them and so forth. So, I see some benefits and some challenges, and also I like your compassion of the effort it takes to move this ship and change it and resculpt it and get it under one roof. It's
a massive effort. Yeah. Another thing that most people don't understand about the structure of LinkedIn is that they don't look at LinkedIn.com. They call that the flagship product as a single entity, right? So the feed is its own product. Publishing is its own product, has its own resources allocated for it. The feed has its own resources allocated for it. Groups, a totally separate team is managing that. It's not just one person running all of these things. They are their own products within the same platform. And because of that, sometimes people from the groups piece need to get moved over into feed because they want to really enhance and empower the feed team to do a better job of surfacing the right content for its members. So they're making all these decisions based on what's the very first value proposition or internal value of LinkedIn is members first. So they're always looking at it through this lens of what do our members need more of, and that's how they're pulling resources from all of these different teams to make sure that the product is as good as it can be.
Well, let's talk about what you're doing at Hootsuite.
Yes.
Because I'm looking at how much time we got left, and we definitely want to cover what you got going on there and how you ended up finding your way there.
Yeah, so let's start with how I found my way here. It's actually it's a very fascinating story for me. So I had left LinkedIn, and I had left. I think you had alluded to this earlier, or at least wanted some explanation for it. It was time for me to go. I had gone from being a content marketing manager in Sales Solutions, the Sales Navigator product, to working my way through the company, to running social strategy for all of LinkedIn. And I was sitting in this chair and saying, I run social media for LinkedIn.com. I had started in the company as this content social media manager, and here I am doing this. And then I looked further in history, and as I explained, I basically came from, dialing for dollars mentality, sitting behind a desk. And I was like, what do I do next? Again, one of the things I was raised to keep looking for is, what is that next play? What do I want to do next after the job that I have today? And as I was sitting there running social strategy for LinkedIn, and I had an amazing team that was actually doing a majority of the work, I was thinking to myself, really, what am I going to do next? And I couldn't figure that out. And part of the reason why I had gone that route was I wanted to kind of walk away from this idea of what social selling was. I wanted to find other ways to add value into the ecosystem. And so I decided it was a good time. The Microsoft acquisition had been announced. It was in the process of doing that. We were slowing down some of our operations because we wanted to make this transition into Microsoft very smooth. And I was like, if I'm going to leave, now is the right time. And so it just made perfect sense. So I walked out. I did, one of the best pieces of advice I got from other LinkedIn alumni who had left were, when you leave, don't go jump and do another job. Get out into the rest of the world. You've lived in this bubble for so long. You got to get out of this bubble, see what else is out there, and continue to add value. So I basically became a consultant for a number of months, and I got to meet dozens of amazing companies building really cool stuff. And while I was along that path, I got an in-mail, again, LinkedIn, from a recruiter that said, hey, we're interested in talking to you about a job. I sent them my boilerplate response, which is literally like a keyboard shortcut for me, and sent off to them. And basically it says something along the lines of, hey, I'm actually good where I'm at now, but send me an email with the job description. I'll let you know if I'm interested. And within minutes, I got an email. And that's the first time that I noticed it was Hootsuite. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Hootsuite. I know this company. The reality is that Hootsuite's been part of my social selling journey since the beginning. Hootsuite became a company in 2008. I started using Hootsuite as a social selling platform, or my own use case, in 2009. So I've been a Hootsuite customer of some aspect or user for a number of years. And the idea that they were starting to open up to this idea of helping more salespeople leverage their tools was fascinating to me. What I found out later was that they're actually building even more tools and more platforms to enable this audience. And that's what really got my attention. Again, it's a story that continues to repeat itself. That's what happened at LinkedIn. I saw they were building this amazing platform called Sales Navigator. And I said, you know what, I want to be a part of this. And then, I hear about, I see what's happening here at Hootsuite and how the sales ecosystem is adopting, dashboards within social streams and content amplification. So they can, it really closes this loop of, listening, connecting, and engaging with decision makers. And their platform does this at a much larger scale.
Interesting. So when we had Mick Lernot on, he mentioned something about, he announced that he was going to be, that Hootsuite was going to have an integration with Sales Prodigy and all that fun stuff. So is there anything that might be coming out from Hootsuite that you could share?
So there is, but I can't share it.
Oh, we try.
I will say that Hootsuite is committed to this idea of how are we listening to social conversations with the intent of connecting with decision makers that are in the process of making these decisions, their buying decisions. Okay. And I think one of the very first lowest barriers of entry is how do you get your salespeople, how do you empower your salespeople to become voices within the network? When the very first part of my methodology for social selling is that visibility creates opportunity. And I repeat that 100 times a day. And every time I'm at a conference or speaking to an event or to a sales team, it comes out of my mouth at least a dozen times. Visibility creates opportunity. And the only way that salespeople are going to become visible is if they learn the nuances of these social platforms and share an abundance of relevant content within these social networks. I say that, before I even ask for 15, 20 minutes of a decision maker's time on a phone call or in a meeting, I have to feel as if I've given them hours and hours and hours worth of value. So I say, you have to give value in excess of whatever it is you're asking for in return. If somebody's buying my platform and they're just going to spend $10,000 on it, they better feel as if they're getting $50,000 worth of value from this product, or they're going to be hesitant to hand over that money. If they think they're getting this product for a steal, they're going to be throwing cash at you and saying, let me in, let me do this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing is true with our personal brands and with who we are as professionals. If we have to find ways on our individual level to add value in excess of what we're asking for, which in most cases it's time. And time is one of the biggest, things that people hold dear to them.
Absolutely.
So, the idea that visibility creates opportunity, and that Hootsuite is going so far down this path and is so focused on empowering and enabling large organizations to share content at scale that they can then track back to revenue was fascinating to me.
Mm. Very interesting.
I was literally just going to ask you, what's the number one piece of advice you would give to sales professionals who are trying to get better at social selling? Would that be it? I mean, I think that's so good. That's like a tweetable.
I'd say that's the ultimate goal, is to get visible, because again, visibility creates opportunity. But first and foremost, I shouldn't even have to say this, but I know I do. You have to make sure your social profiles are legitimate. You said this at the very beginning of this call. Like, you need to have profiles online, not just LinkedIn, but every social profile that is publicly visible needs to be customer facing. It can't be about me. It has to be about them. And the more that I read people's profiles and I think they're speaking to me, it draws me in even further. The moment I look at somebody's profile and all I see is them talking about themselves, talking about how great they are and the great things that they've done, and that's all they're talking about, I just turn away and I want to go find somebody who's actually going to provide value for me.
It's like sales 101.
Yes.
Right? Just translate online. Yeah, but it's so few people do it right. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Good stuff. You guys have a final question? Arn and Greg?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was asking if you guys have a final
question. I just want to say, where do you see the cutting edge in the future is of moving forward? Because we've been looking at great topics from machine learning to bots helping us to, with the future of sales, with the thought leaders around the world, and wanted to give let you look into your crystal ball and add a few cents.
So I'm a self-professed nerd at heart, and I'll be the first to admit that machine learning is like speaking a whole nother foreign language outside of this galaxy to me. But from what I've seen and what's been explained to me, machine learning is going to transform the sales ecosystem in ways that most people can't even fathom yet. The idea of how they're going to be able to map all of these digital assets in a way that are going to help salespeople tell compelling stories based on millions of fragmented data points is amazing to me. Bots is another one, since you brought that up. I think that bots are going to continue to be evolve and help people through the buying process to some extent. I don't think that they're ever going to replace salespeople, but you're going to see bots becoming more and more of the point me in the right direction of X, and something's going to tell you where that is. I believe that for the individual sales rep, what I think the next trend, and one of the reasons why I'm at Hootsuite, is this idea that social selling is going to start becoming integrated. We're going to find more and more of these companies that are wanting to give their salespeople one tool to use, as opposed to here's a library of things that you can plug into, or here's 15 different tabs you need to have running in order to see this stuff. As an individual, that's why I started using Hootsuite. I hated having a tab for Twitter, a tab for LinkedIn, a tab for this, a tab for that. Hootsuite just combined all that. It collapsed it all into one dashboard for me, where I can keep one tab open and just bounce around and search things. And I think that that's where social selling from a purely social standpoint is going, which is one of the reason why Hootsuite was so appealing to me. But I also think that just the general technology stack in sales is going to continue to evolve. And we're going to start seeing consolidation in a lot of this. In fact, we already are in some ways, like Marketo just acquiring ToutApp, for example. Mm-hmm. We're going to continue to see how marketing systems are now getting filtered into a very specific sales use case. And I think that that tech stack space is going to be fascinating to watch unfold. The digital transformation is something that's been happening across enterprises for the last, let's say, 5 years. And it's always either started at the C level with the very executive team, and then it's moved into different departments, and mostly into marketing, because marketers are naturally going digital. But we're now seeing this digital transformation happen within the sales organization. And I think that's going to be that's where I'm most interested to watch things unfold.
And do you have an Amazon Alexa in your house yet?
I do. In fact, you were bringing this up on the front of the call. Like, I'm going to go home today. I'm going to plug this thing into my Alexa.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
It'll if you decide that you want to enable the skill.
Yeah, it's in there.
It's in there.
It's in there.
It comes up as part of your flash briefing. But
I can hear Greg every morning.
Why not? Right? And I sound good. No. But and actually I was just looking at Amazon's Alexa store, and I wanted to see if Hootsuite actually had an Alexa skill, and they don't. But could you imagine? I guess what it would be like that if Amazon
social media tip of the day or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could do something like that.
We're doing that.
But how would I guess if you were to imagine interacting with your Alexa or Google Home device or whatever it is, Apple's Siri talking box whenever that comes out. Interacting with Hootsuite through a singular device like that. How would you have you thought about how that would work, and if you could probably apply some of that in a social
consume information? That's interesting, right? It's like, read me the last 10 mentions of my name on Twitter. It scares me to think that Alexa will actually send tweets on my behalf, because I'm already afraid enough that Alexa is listening to every random conversation in my house. In fact, it's really fascinating. Let's talk about Alexa for a second. That commercials, that brands are now picking up on this and actually adding the name Alexa into their commercials, and that's triggering my device to respond. That scares me.
Yeah.
In fact, there's news stories where a commercial went out and somebody actually ordered some like $2,000 product on Amazon because their TV told Alexa to do it. My Alexa is usually on mute.
Yeah, mine too. Even though I know that it's not like recording, sending information unless it's activated, but still. All right. Yeah. Well, hopefully that's something that it'd be interesting to see, as you mentioned the sales stack, how these kind of devices actually start to get integrated into the workplace, or even for those in the field. I'd be interested to, like you get a lead, like maybe a sales manager sends a sales guy a lead and says, Alexa, tell me the last 5 tweets from this particular person.
Yep.
And it reads it off to you or something like that. Just so it's kind of fun to interact. Maybe the kind of that coaching aspect of sales might be.
Yeah, I think that's a great place for Alexa, like being that virtual, literal coach.
Well, we want to honor the time, and I think this opens up new shoes and new possible shows we could do. So we want our listeners to give feedback, what they'd like more of. We'd love to have you on the show again, maybe a deeper dive in something. I do want to take a moment in wrapping up to thank, we're very honored that we were mentioned on Inc. magazine online. Greg, would you mention that? We'll put it in the show notes, because that's a real honor of acknowledgement of our show, because we've worked for over 5 years on building it.
Yeah, I think we're actually past the 6-year mark now. We got
okay. Thank you. 6 years. Excuse me. Thank you.
But I'm careful to correct him all the time. Yeah. But anyways, we have so right after we had talked with Tim Hughes and Katie King about AI in sales, the next day we found out that we were published in a list of, I think it was 14 podcasts to make you a successful entrepreneur. And we came right after Gary Vaynerchuk and right before Jason Calacanis, and the number 5 spot. So we're pretty stoked about that. Completely unexpected. We got a nice little burst of traffic, then a bunch more downloads. So what we do know is that Koka is going to drive even more downloads of this episode than Inc. magazine, because
that's right.
He's the godfather of social selling.
Yeah. So
gauntlet thrown.
Yeah. At least you want to add a quick tip, and we'll wrap up, because this has been just a great show. We'll put a lot of these things in the show notes. So come to our website, link you into sales /podcast. I'll get it. Go ahead, Elise.
Yeah. No, this is so cool, Koka. You're like my new social selling hero. Man, I'm in awe. So yeah, it's been awesome. I guess I'll tie in with some of what you shared about sharing value, and just recommend that if you guys liked what Koka shared, and his philosophy of just throwing as much value at your audience as you can, I would definitely check out that book, Love is the Killer App. I think that's got some great tips in there to help organize your learning, and organize the content that you share as well. And just schedule time every single day, even if it's 10 minutes in the morning or at night, to study your industry, collect a database of information that you can share with your audience, and just start creating a schedule of posting that content out to your audience. Because I love that. Visibility is, what was it, Koka, that you said?
Visibility creates opportunity.
Visibility creates opportunity. I can't give a better tip than that. I mean, that's it. Right? That's it. He gave it. So do what Koka said. That's my tip.
Great words to live by.
That's right. Excellent. Well, thanks again for being on the show. We want to tell people to check out future shows. We welcome comments on it. We're on all the main platforms. I'll let Greg wrap it up. They can find us, and also check out our socialselling.training. So where can they find us? And we would love to hear your feedback and reviews on the site.
All right, let's see if I can remember how to do this. Let's see. Thank you very much for listening to the Social Selling Podcast by Linking Into Sales. You can definitely find us on iTunes, Google Play Music, TuneIn, Stitcher, and on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and catch the latest episodes. We have some great how-to videos and things like that. Don't forget to enable the social selling tip of the day on your Amazon Echo device. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and you get some great tips from me. And if you miss those, definitely go out to linkinintosales.com/Alexa to catch up on those and read the transcripts that we have available. Thank you very much, Koka, for joining us today. This is episode 110 of the Social Selling Podcast, and we look forward to hearing from you on the next show.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
See-